Welcome everyone to what is the final event of 2020, which has been a very strange year for the Friends and everyone. I'm delighted to have Mandy O'Neill here. She's an Irish visual artist based in Dublin. And I feel like I met Mandy so long ago now, and we discussed even before the Siam exhibition was in place, this talk. So I'm delighted that she's here with us in this visual online space to discuss it. I'm sure most of you have seen Siam by now, either online or in person as well. And I'm delighted that Mandy's going to do this talk for us today. As usual with all our online events, questions and answers, pop them down at the bottom and we'll do them at the end. And yeah, that's it. So I'll let Mandy take over here, and any problems, just pop them into the chat as well. Okay, thanks, Mel.
Okay. Yeah, it's just strange to be talking into this computer screen. I haven't actually done much of this. I've managed to escape from a lot of it, but I think I would just go directly into my slideshow. And actually, first of all, thank you to Sive and thanks to the Chester Beatty for asking me to do this talk and to respond to the exhibition. I'm just going to open this here now. Okay, so yeah, in terms of my response to the exhibition, it might seem a little bit eclectic, but it really is, as it says here, an artist's response, and it's almost like a gut response, and it's how I felt about it in relation to my own work and the way I think about working, and also, I suppose, the historical context that I would have studied in, and maybe even the first time I heard about the exhibition, the first thing I thought about was, I suppose, the politics of portraiture, and particularly in relation to, I suppose, colonial or imperial mindsets. But that was before I knew anything about John Thomson or his work. And also, as I said to Sive, I think you guys probably know a lot more about him than I do at this stage, because you've heard so much. So most of my talk it won't necessarily relate directly to the Siam exhibition. And when I say the politics of portraiture, I suppose what I'm going to look at today really is the context, as in who's being photographed, who's the photographer, what is the power balance between the photographer and the subject, where do the images go, how are they seen, how can they be seen in different ways. So I'll just go into the slideshow here. So yeah, just for myself, I think there was a big blurb there that you could have read anyway, but so at the moment I am artist in residence at DCU. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get out there much because of the pandemic restrictions, but I'm also a PhD candidate in DCU. I just started in October, and again, haven't seen the campus, so all of my research has been from home, but my PhD research is about place and the local and the representation of the inner suburbs of Dublin. So that's actually been quite good, because I can actually walk around. And then in terms of John Thomson, I think, as I said, I think you know a lot about him already. He was a travel photographer, documentary photographer, member of the Royal Ethnographic Society. And from what I've read myself, rather than a purely artistic approach, he really seems to be being of more of a scientific, ethnographic, anthropological bent. And that was the way that he would have seen his work, that he was collecting these images to, I suppose, to show people back in where he lived. And so there would have been that colonial and imperial context. So again, as I said, what do I mean by photography and the politics of portraiture? I've already mentioned it, and it's a huge topic, too big to go into in depth today. So what I really pulled out of it when I was looking at John Thomson's work and my own work, was the idea of context. So the first thing that I'm going to look at is not the Siam exhibition, but it's to kind of put Thomson in within the context of his larger body of work. So, and this might seem a bit left field, but this will kind of contextualize things as well, I think. This is a very famous image. Some of you are probably familiar with it, by Dorothea Lange. It's entitled The Migrant Mother. And this was taken in the 1930s as part of an initiative by the Farm Security Administration. And it was in the 1930s California Dust Bowl. And the idea of this commission was to basically record the life of people who were settling within the Dust Bowl, and I suppose the hardships that they were facing, in the hope that something would be done to help them. So this image was taken by Lange, and obviously it's cropped to a certain degree here, but yeah, it's a really, really iconic image. I suppose it speaks to the Madonna and Child, to the, you know, I suppose that there's a lot of people can relate to it. And this image has been seen all over the world and has been recontextualized in many, many ways. And I actually researched this for my original BA thesis. And this woman, Florence Owens Thomson was her name. And after, I mean, I think it was years after this image was taken, somebody kind of tracked her down. And she was quoted, as it says here, as saying that, "I wish she, Lange, hadn't taken my picture. I can't get a penny out of it. She didn't ask my name. She said she wouldn't sell the pictures, and she said she'd send me a copy, but she never did." So I suppose that's kind of setting the context for my talk today in terms of the role of the photographer, the context of the subject, the power relations between that, where these images can end up and how they can be recontextualized. And in some ways, you know, the subject, as in this case, seems to have had very little power. And I will kind of come back to this at the end of the talk. So moving on, in terms of looking at context again. So as you're probably aware, that Thomson had basically produced these multiple editions of books of China and its people, as it says here. And again, they were very much within that anthropological context of, as he would have seen it, as objectively gathering information, recording in a kind of a scientific way. And this is one of the plates from one of the volumes. And as you can see, it's very, I suppose it's entitled The Natives of Formosa. And I think Formosa was one of the places that he visited. And the people in the images themselves are very much kind of decontextualized from, I suppose, where they were taken. And they're kind of seen as more types or typologies. And in some ways this is quite characteristic of this type of photography at the time. But in some ways they're kind of dehumanized in that they are, they're just kind of grouped together as types of people rather than as individuals themselves. This was another plate. And just to say as well, I mean, these are, to me as a portrait photographer, these are really beautiful images. And there's another huge, swathe of photographic criticism that would, criticize the use of beautiful images to illustrate certain things. But, I can't help but be drawn to them. But there was a text in the actual book written by Thomson himself, just to illustrate his take on this. And he says, "Of the 4 heads shown in these pictures, the 2 upper ones are fair types of the aged laborers of China. Darby and Joan have for many years been associated together, and their life has been a uniform scene of hardships and toil. The 2 lower heads are those of a son and daughter belonging to the same class." And then underneath, 4 heads, types of the laboring class. So as you can see, it's very much a cataloging, and in a sense, it's, a lot of the power lies with the photographer. And again, these will be these are going to be read in a certain way by the Victorian audience, which would have been his audience of the time. And just moving into like a further context, this was moving away from the China photographs. This was which you might be aware of this as well. This is the cover of the book produced by Thomson and the writer Adolph Smith. And this chronicles the work that he did documenting, I suppose, different types of people on the streets of London in the 1800s. And I wasn't aware of this, and I came across it in my research. And I kind of went down a rabbit hole because there's so much, the images are just really fascinating. But again, he would have seen it as a type of topographical documentary type, objective documentary. And this particular work is considered to be the beginning of that, the idea of, say, a socially concerned documentary photography, like the emergence of that type of work. And just pulling out one of the images from the book. To me, there's a difference here in terms of these people are more compared to the more typological images we've just looked at from China. Like there is a context here. These people are situated within where they live, what they're doing. And to me, as a photographer, it really is a beautiful image, like the light and the I suppose the composition. So in this ways, while Thomson considers himself to be quite objective, like there's certain decisions made here, aesthetic decisions that puts him a little bit outside of that. And also the fact that the guy in the background is kind of looking at him. So you can see, the photographer is in this picture and engaged with it. So to me, there's what it is. I mean, again, I mentioned that debate around the idea of the aestheticization of, I suppose, the less fortunate or vulnerable peoples. But in this sense, I don't. As an image, it has kind of more of a strength, and I think the people in it are more themselves and have more subjectivity. This is another example from the same book, and again, while it is that typographic imagery, I think there's a certain pride in these men, and the fact that the guy to the left is looking at the photographer. I mean, it doesn't appear that he's imposing, and again, it's aesthetically, it's quite beautiful. But again, as I said, it's within this context of a socially concerned photography, which would have been very much a Victorian idea that you would, of the poor as in need of saving and help, and that these types of images would go towards, I suppose, helping with charitable organizations and philanthropy and such like. And I mean, all of that has its own problematics. Again, too many to go into for our short talk today. So moving on from that, and just to get to the Siam exhibition, I think this image was a standout for me, and I'm not even sure if it's hanging on. It has been used as on the Chester Beatty website. I don't know if it's actually hanging on the wall because I couldn't see it when I looked at the virtual exhibition. But to me, this is it's very striking, and it kind of reminded me of it did make me think of my own work to a degree. And I think myself and Clive maybe even discussed that when we met originally. And the difference here as well between this and the other, I suppose, and this is not China, but the other China images, is, I suppose, the decision to print these full bleed negatives. And that is a decision taken by the curator, the exhibition. I think this is a traveling exhibition, so it would have been taken probably at the beginning of this. So there is context, and there is, I think it was the scale of the way these are shown, the details. I think it really kind of pulls them apart from those type of typological heads, and that type of imagery that we looked at before. And I think there's a certain dignity that you can see in this boy, even if he does look mildly, maybe just slightly vulnerable, but there's a directness to the gaze that he is very aware of the photographer, and that makes us very aware of that relationship between them. And again, I couldn't find any further information about him. It's just that he is identified, but the fact that he is identified with his name, kind of, I think for me, elevates that into a more kind of a balanced, I suppose, power interaction between the photographer and the subject. So as I said, this is going to be eclectic, so it's going to probably jump around a little bit, but I wanted to show you something different, because I know that you've already seen quite a lot of and heard a lot about the actual specific exhibition. So for me, the image of mine that this brought to mind, it was my image of this of Diane DTA. And Diane was a pupil at Larkin Community College, which is a secondary school off O'Connell Street in Dublin, where I was artist in residence for 2 years. And it's quite a tough school. It's it's a DESH school. There's a lot going on, and it took a lot of time, I suppose, for me of not taking pictures, which would be just to speak to my own process, where I would have to kind of sit back and wait and let people get to know me, build up their trust, until I eventually actually get to even photograph them. So this image was taken towards the end of my first year there, and I photographed all the senior cycle students. And again, like a lot of the time, the students are just kind of seen as this mass of, this mass body of pupils or students or school. So my thing is I like to try and individualize them. So within that, I did not photograph them within the backdrop of the school, but I specifically brought in this kind of plain but lovely blue backdrop, so that the sitter themselves can stand out, and the details really are all in her own individual details, the way she has her hair, the earring, and also that gaze. I mean, to me, I feel like there's, like, myself and Diane are very much on a par within this image, and if anything, that she has the power, because she is just so strong and her gaze is so strong. So I just wanted to kind of bring it on a little whistle top tour of basically just to illustrate, you make the image, and then what kind of a life it has afterwards, where it goes, and how you can negotiate that with the subject. So this is an image of Diane hanging in the National Gallery. This is in 2018, and amazingly and brilliantly for me and Diane, this image actually won the Zurich Portrait Prize in 2018, which seems like so long ago now, but so it was wonderful. It was just such, well, obviously it was great to win, but also there's a catalogue that goes along with this, and I was able to speak about the school and about the context of the work, and then this catalogue, I suppose, travels a lot of people can pick it up. So the actual context of the story and of my work gets to be heard, or I suppose a lot of people get to read about it and discuss it. So this image is from last year, and this was from an exhibition at the Gallery of Photography in Dublin. And here we have Diane again, and she is kind of contextualized with some of her peers. And this exhibition was based on 10 years of the work that I've done with in artist residences with schools in Dublin. So they were taken from Larkin, from a number of other schools, and mostly primary schools. And just to show, because this is really important for me, because in working with the school, my idea is not just to go in, take my images and walk away with my, my lovely portraits or project and then just kind of, forget about the participants. So it was really important for me that they get to enjoy it, to interact with it, and to be part of it. So this was one of the classes from Larkin who came to visit. And I think these were this was the 6th year class, and they were brilliant. And they came and they sat down, they asked loads of questions, and they actually used these questions and they reviewed the exhibition for their Leaving Cert question, which to me is like, I just really love it when, my work kind of moves outside of this art context, because really it is about people and it's about the people that I work with. So that was really great. And actually some of these students had never even entered a gallery in Dublin, and they're like 17, 18, because they didn't quite feel comfortable. So that was a huge thing. And then this was kind of just as a more funny side. These are pupils from Gaelscoil Bara in Cabra, and they're a little bit more wild, and they literally will dance or sing at the drop of a hat. So when they come in to visit, some of their images are also in the exhibition. They came to visit and they gave us an impromptu Irish dance, which was amazing. And in some ways for me, these are the highlights when, the people I work with really come back to interact with the exhibition. And again, as well as working with images, I also work with text and kind of ephemeral pieces. This is one I have on here actually, and we produced a series of these based on some of the words of the students. And this is one of the small boys from Francis Street School that I also work with, who decided to make this into a paper plane. So you have to be expecting your, total irreverence when you work with children sometimes. But also, again, I kind of, I appreciate this and I really like this. And just coming to the end of this in the context of just where one image can go, I suppose this was bringing it back to the school. And I don't know, you can really tell the scale of these images here, but they were really huge. And this is Larkin Community College on Sean McDermott Street. And in conjunction with the exhibition, we had these printed and they were installed outside the school for 3 months. And the idea was that, people who are not necessarily going to go to the exhibition, they might not know anything about it, but that literally that people from the area and people passers-by can get to engage with the work, and also that all of the pupils of the school can get to enjoy it. So that was, and we kind of worried that they might have, that they might not stay up there, but they were literally left untouched for the entire 3 months, and people were really proud of them. And I was really delighted that I had done that. So just coming back to the point of today as well. So this was another image that really spoke to me. And again, it's really, I think it's for the images in the exhibition, they're really beautiful objects. That decision to print those full glass plate negatives, even with the slight imperfections, without cropping them, I think it's really stunning. But I suppose for me, just as somebody who photographs children a lot, I was kind of drawn to this, the small child, and that, the fact that small children are quite vulnerable, and the ethics of photographing them at all. And it's something that I have to battle with all the time to make sure they're comfortable and they really want to be involved. And obviously that's outside of all permissions and everything else, all the official stuff that's required. I still want them, they need to be happy in terms of the images, and they can be quite sensitive to the images of them that you put out there, particularly in this kind of social media frenzied age when they're much more image conscious. But I think the princess here seems quite at ease. Maybe that's by virtue of her rank. She seems very self-composed, and then the fact that there is another person the image. Yeah, and I thought, even though it's not directly related, but I kind of look at this as, this is a girl called Koch, and she's kind of my princess, I suppose. Or the version of this. This is what I thought of when I looked at that image, even though she is older. But it is that, that kind of ceremonial dress. This was taken in 2014, and this is at a school called Gael Scolbara in Cabra. And I worked with the school for up to I think it was nearly 4 years as an artist in residence. And I started taking these confirmation pictures in 2014, and I have taken them every year since. And they're just fascinating to me, even in terms of the sartorial difference, the way the style slightly changes, the demeanor of the kids. And I think I've noticed that they seem to be getting bigger and taller, but this particular image was, I think one of the big things for me here is the gaze and the confidence of this young woman. And there's definitely, if we go back to thinking about that subject photographer relationship, I mean, she is definitely holding her own in this picture. And this actually went on to be featured in the Hennessy Portrait Prize in the National Gallery in 2014, which was the first time that I had worked there, and it was just phenomenal. And she got to come to the launch, and she was like a superstar, and she really, really enjoyed that. So again, that's a big plus for me. So just moving on. Again, back to the Siam exhibition, and I think I like this. Again, this is a very strong image. Although in some ways, maybe I don't know how entirely comfortable the king even looks in this image. But I think as an object, as again the glass plate negative, all the regalia, there's so much to kind of unpick here, and again, it would have been viewed in a certain way by a Victorian audience, in terms of like the, looking at the other, which I'm sure you've looked at before, and that the imperial gaze. But again, it's a beautiful, and it's a really strong image. And just, I don't know if this even really relates, but I thought I just wanted to pick out something that would, from my own work, in terms of working with older people. And this is Mick. This is from a series that I did with the men's shed in Cabra. And there's a huge difference between working with older people and working with the young people and adolescents. And it was interesting because it was quite, I think these men are in their 60s, 70s, even older, and actually they were quite shy, and maybe a generation that are not as used to having their photograph taken all the time. And certainly this group were not. So I had to kind of take my time, and we did a lot of chatting, and we took a lot of kind of just casual photographs before they were actually willing to have their portrait taken. But this is one of the ones I pulled out, and I just it's out of that context, but again, I wanted to kind of individualize them, and I think there's a very strong gaze here, and I feel like the subject is confronting me in this picture, and again, that there's kind of there's an even type of relationship going on. So this kind of brings me back to, you remember the migrant mother that we looked at the beginning of this? And something actually I was just reading this morning, that this, a piece of writing around this particular image, and this is an image by John Thomson, and from a series called of The Crawlers, and that was part of his London work, and it's a very famous image. But in the thing that I read this morning, basically said that this was almost like a precursor, like albeit 70 years previously, to that image of the migrant mother and that idea of, the Madonna and child. But then when I read further, I found out that this child does not actually belong to this woman. but that she was minding the child for the mother who had to go out and work for the day. And then maybe at the very end, she might get like a cup of tea or a slice of bread, and that was her payment for the day. And it's entirely heartbreaking. And I think it's kind of different to the other London images that we looked at of John Thomson. But that's in the subject and just in that abject poverty. And I think we cannot help but feel huge empathy for the subject, even just in her demeanor and her circumstances. So as I researched this further, and I came across something that it might be deemed a little bit controversial, and certainly was a bit shocking to me, even though I don't know, can we be shocked by anything at this stage? And in the context of what we're living through at the moment. And I came across a website. Now, obviously, again, these images were made in the this one 1877, in terms of where things end up and how they can be recontextualized. And sometimes, whatever about having them recontextualized in an exhibition or a book, sometimes it can go further. And you'll know what I mean when I show you the next slide. So this was something that I came across on a website that is literally selling face masks with the image of this woman on it. And to me, I think that encapsulates something that is very wrong with them, like ethically. The idea that of, her story is completely lost, the context is completely lost. And outside of that, she's basically just become this consumable. And I think why anyone would want to wear that on their face is kind of questionable to me. And I did think twice about even showing this today, but I just thought it would be really interesting, in terms of what I'm talking about today, and in terms of how, I suppose, the life that a photograph can have, and also how this can become completely out of control of the photographer at a certain point. So I think that's all I'm going to say in terms of John Thomson today and the exhibition. I hope it gave you some food for thought, and I hope it was good, and maybe you'll have some questions. But at the end, as I was saying to Saif, because it's Christmas, and I kind of thought it would be nice to finish on something nice. And just to let you know, I don't know if anybody is aware of it, but I had, when I won the Zurich Portrait Prize in 2018 for my picture of Diane that you saw today, I was also asked to do a commission of another person for the National Gallery. It's basically taken 2 years for that to happen. And partly that was due to the pandemic. So I'm just going to give you a preview. It opened on Tuesday at the National Gallery, so you can actually see it there. So I'm just going to give you a preview of my own image. And this is my portrait of the writer Edna O'Brien. So just a little insight. She was 90 on Tuesday, so we were able to unveil the portrait on her 90th birthday, which was amazing. And yeah, just to give you a little bit of insight, I actually made this picture in February, towards the end of February this year, literally 2 weeks before we went into lockdown in Dublin. So it just wouldn't have happened if it hadn't happened at that time. And it was made in her home in Knightsbridge in London, where I literally had an hour to make this. So it was a very pressurized, but it was one of the greatest experiences I've had taking a portrait. Like, she was amazing, really fascinating. She made us tea afterwards, and we had a great chat. And I was just delighted it turned out to be her in the end. And I think the fact that the pandemic dragged it out so much and meant that it was unveiled on her 90th birthday just by chance. So, but anyway, and this is an image of the portrait hanging in the National Gallery at the moment. I think it's the Modern Irish wing. And just to show you, she was featured on the front of the Irish Times yesterday. So anyway, I just thought that would be a nice thing. And also I'd love for people to go and see it and let me know what they think. I'm really, really happy it's there. And yeah, so I suppose happy Christmas. So that's all I have for now.
I'll just see if anyone has any questions. Thank you so much, Mandy. Yeah, I suppose with John Thomson, he actually situated a lot of, like, he made sure his subjects were like, you know, exactly that chair was there and stuff like that. So he took an awful lot of I suppose artistic license. They weren't as casual as he made them out to look.
Yeah, not as objective.
Yeah. I think he painted in different sky, like, you know, he would paint out blocks of sky on the glass negative so that it would appear more, I suppose, artistic in a way. And yeah, so he's a very interesting, I suppose, very different type of photographer for the time. You know, he really set the bar high, I guess.
Yeah, I think you can see that in the images. I mean, there's a beauty to them. And I think maybe just in terms of what I was reading, even if he was thinking in his own head that these were objective, they really were not.
Yeah.
You know, as he said, he put a lot into
yeah, a lot. And you know, I think he was quite forward thinking in that he was the first person to go to Angkor Wat and photograph that. And I mean, just the logistics of having to even go there with, you know, cases and cases of glass negatives and whatnot.
As well.
And all the things you need to, so but yeah, it was very interesting to see the London photographs. I was trying to find them myself. They are hard enough to source. So yeah, I don't see any questions coming in there. But I am sure that if anyone has any questions, they could email them to me if they like, and I can pass them on maybe to Mandy if she would oblige, or I can try and answer them in-house here. For us, I see one just popped up there.
Oh, should I stop sharing this?
Oh yeah, if it makes no difference.
Okay.
Telka just says thanks so much for coming. I suppose it was fascinating to have you and to have you give that sort of modern perspective on what most people consider very modern portraits of John Thomson as well, and compare and contrast. It's brilliant. But yeah, I'd like to just thank Mandy for giving us this fantastic talk today, and the Friends will be back in January. We have a couple of events in January, and your brochure would have gone out by email this time, just because our events are unfortunately going to be online for the next little while until things calm down. And you should definitely go in to the National Gallery and check out Mandy's beautiful portrait, because I saw it come up on Instagram on Tuesday, and it was something I have on my list to do over the Christmas break. So thanks again to you, Mandy. Thank you.
Okay, and thanks for asking me. And as I said, I'm sorry I don't have a wider knowledge of John Thomson, but I'll put that on my list as well.
I think everyone's tired of John Thomson now. And just to say, our next exhibition will be the Edo in Japan prints. So you should check it out. It'll be open in February as well. So we'll be sending out notices to everyone when that is done. So thanks, Mel. I'm just going to finish up here, and happy Christmas and happy New Year to everyone as well. So we'll see you soon. Bye.
Okay, thanks, Ive. Bye.